We're getting started in just one moment, y'all. Y'all know what this is. It's what's blowing on Wednesday, and we are talking about the Plantations for Reparations topic. Have some special guests joining us tonight. One of them being a TikTok creator, another being a reparations advocate in his own right, and in the world of academia, Khalifa Lee. So we will be definitely making sure that we're tuning in for this hot topic conversation. I'm letting y'all get in here. Thank you so much. Girl behind the mic, I see you, sis. I want you on this program. Let's make it happen. Make sure you please send me an email. The email is cmxday, 519 at gmail.com. All right, Mellow Cap, I see you in here as well. We're getting in here. Girl behind the mic is that business, y'all. Y'all make sure y'all subscribe. Thank y'all so much for being a part of this hot topic, this conversation. We about this realness today. We're going to be about it because y'all know what time it is. It's time for What's Going On Wednesday. Topic for today, Plantations for Reparations. What is it? Why is it? And why is now time for it? So let's get it. Let's get it going. Let me bring my panelists up to the stage. We got some hard stops at 6 o'clock, mine being one of them. So let's make sure we bring them on up. All right. Woo, 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 woo. Thank you so much, Jose Garcia. I see you in here. Thank you so much. And welcome to the stage, gentlemen. How are you?
Good.
Awesome. How are we doing on this awesome Wednesday? What's going on? First of all, we want to have everyone introduce themselves. Y'all, I got some glare. I put on the glasses for you, Travis. You like that?
I do.
Just for you. Khalifa, welcome. We want to, first of all, I'm going to allow you gentlemen to introduce yourselves and where you're from. Then we're going to jump right into it. Again, we have some hard stop today, and we want to make sure we are tackling this head on and making sure that we're not going to filibuster. We're going to do something that the government hasn't done in years when it comes to this topic. We're not going to filibuster. We're going to get right to it. Absolutely. All right, since you were the first in the room, Brother Khalifa, go ahead and introduce yourself. And then, of course, Travis, I'm going to put myself on mute so you all can make sure that we are hearing our guests loud and clear. And we want to just say hello. Thank you to everyone joining us in the chat. We got some newbies in the chat today, as well as some faithful Garcia coming out of the West Coast, California. We want to thank you so much for being a part of this live. And then, of course, if you're watching the playback, you already know I appreciate your support being here. But definitely being a part of the live session is absolutely appreciated because y'all know what it does. It boosts us up in the algorithms. So we want to continue that energy going. Okay, go ahead, Brother Khalifa, and then, of course, Travis, and I'm going on mute. You're on mute, Brother Khalifa. Yeah, okay. That's better. You see you're off now. Go ahead and just repeat everything you said because you were on mute when you were talking at first. I still can't hear. All right, Travis, you want to go ahead and give your introduction? He's probably going to have to come out and come back in. Sometimes that happens, of course, when you're on these mobile devices. That definitely, uh, but go ahead, Travis, your background as well as, hey, how did you stumble upon this topic, especially being such a hot topic? I'm sure you're a popular person in many circles because of your advocacy. But go ahead and also give your location. Where are you living with us from?
So I'm calling into you from St. Paul, Minnesota, and this is where I've lived for oh, I guess it depends upon how old I am now. It's like however many years I am older than 18. That's how long I've lived in St. Paul. Before that, I grew up in Marshall, Minnesota, which is kind of like a small agricultural community. Um, and I moved up here to St. Paul to go to college and studied history. And I think that's kind of where I first started to get an inkling of my interest in this issue. So this was in the late 1990s, and I got involved with the campaign to. So it was a class action lawsuit filed by black farmers against the U.S. Department of Agriculture regarding the pattern of discrimination that had reduced the land holdings and number of black farmers in the United States over several decades. So that was kind of like my introduction to not to advocacy or activism, because I'd been doing that some in high school, but to kind of this specific issue. Um, and we can kind of get into it a little bit more later if you like, but I think when I really kind of got set on fire as far as reparations is concerned was actually when I years later went to graduate school in ecology, and I started learning about how much the investment of your parents, whether you have it or don't have it, matters to the outcomes of your life. And, you know, it's not just people who look after their kids. That's kind of universal, or, nearly universal. And when that's taken away from you, um, it's not something you just recover from. We don't expect that from, I can't cut all of the leaves off of an apple tree and expect, a bumper crop of apples. Yet that's kind of how our culture thinks about things. You just start over from scratch and it doesn't matter. Just pick yourself up by your bootstraps. So that's when I started to realize, oh, this is a whole bunch of, can I swear? S S word, whole bunch of S word. And it's just sort of been a gradual process of um, you know, unwinding everything that I had learned up to that point. And, I think it's sort of once you see that, once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. So you and I linked up over TikTok because I've been talking about reparations on my channel. Um, Kind of an accidental TikTok creator, didn't really plan on it, but it's an issue I'm passionate about. I think not enough people are talking about it. I'd like more people to be talking about it. So I'm going to talk about it. And that's what I've been doing. And that's sort of how we linked up.
I want to say this before Brother Khalifa is back. Thank you so much, Khalifa, for back on, because we definitely didn't want to miss you. But I wanted to say this before Brother Khalifa comes on about you, Travis, particularly. You know what I appreciate about your content is the fact that people, uh, I want to say from my personal experience, and this is, I saw an old adage. They said that whenever someone says no offense, that means they're about to end. So I give that disclaimer up first and foremost. But what happens with uh, what I have seen personally, what happens with this conversation is I can get, I've been a part of literally every political party. I've been a Dem, I've been an independent, I've been a Republican. I was actually elected as a Republican. Fancy that. And I've been a libertarian and now a part of Mahali. However, no matter these circles, whenever the topic of conversation of reparations comes up, because I've always been a strong advocate of it. My father is a historian. Mother was a English teacher, or a teacher rather. She was in education, and then they both became social workers. So, at any rate, when we talk about this conversation, when I say we, I mean African Americans, we don't need to be having this conversation as much as you need to be having this conversation. People of the we want to say the complexion for the protection, they need to be having these conversations, because that is really what I think a big part of not appreciating just said, the privilege of when we talk about privilege, it's not, when we talk about white privilege, it's not saying that white you'll never have issues about being poor, about being poverty, about being poor education, never anything like that. But what it means is that you won't be with those things because of your white skin. That's what white privilege means. And to have this conversation in there of saying that, hey, you being white has never stopped you, has never gotten you followed in a store. It's never gotten you, even when coming into our neighborhoods, hasn't gotten you murdered. If anything, I've been in black neighborhoods and I've seen when everyone can kind of like a familiar, jovial kind of spirit. But when a white person enters the chat, it's a different energy. And so awareness is appreciated. And that is what I found most interesting and most appealing about your content, is understanding of that awareness. So I want to thank you. And I want to thank you for also I say, you know what, lend your skin. If you do anything else, lend your skin to this conversation. Thank you. And so thank you for being not just being a supporter, but also being a contributor to understanding and appreciate the awareness. Okay. Thank you, Travis. And last but not least, you're back with us. Go ahead and give your background. You came upon this subject. And what city are you living us from? Where are you living with us from? I mean, I know, but the rest of the group may not know.
Can you hear me? Am I good now? Am I good? Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm live right now from Atlanta, Georgia, currently at a school that I work at, where my community garden is right now, over in the SWATS area of the city of Atlanta, Georgia, and city of South Fulton, literally on the cusp. And Khalifa, I am a community activist, an artist, agriculturalist, and very much when it comes to this work here, I'm an active participant in the movement for reparations, and have been for many years now. I guess it's kind of been like my coming out day, you know what I'm saying? Like it's been a very interesting day talking about this much of the day for the most part. And as this for me started as a student in college, from which I'm not sure, should I say that for later on through the conversation, Corey, or should I go ahead and throw it out? Okay, well, as a student, it was actually a class project from which he was at the time the Dean of African American Studies, who happens to also have a class. And in his class is a sociology and African American Studies class. By chance, I was chosen to be a part of the group to do the study, do the research, and also do the presentation to the president of the school, the faculty, staff, and deans, and all the people. Made sure we had to do it as a grade, invite everybody to this presentation. And the presentation was getting the school to apologize for their role in slavery and build a memorial. That was the subject topic and the work that was to be done for our project. What a project, right? We need more academia like that. From which, in that, the school I went to, University of Virginia, did state their profound regret. You know how we do with language. And in doing so, finally, after 13 years of struggle, without the university's help initially, and then you know how things do when we see a good push and backing behind something, especially when money is involved, they finally jumped on board with the work that the community members of Charlottesville, the faculty, staff, and also the students, my successors and my peers, along with myself, were continuously doing for many years, as school finally jumped on board. And now we have a memorial, which is actually based upon a design that my team and others were part of initially designing. And it combined all the designs together along with a couple of changes. And now we have an immaculate memorial for our enslaved labor ancestors, which we had also dedicated to the community of Charlottesville, because they are the descendants, at least the localized descendants. And that's the short end of the stick for much of what we have going on at UVA.
I want to make sure that as we delve into this, and again, thank y'all so much. Y'all are coming on in here. Welcome, Northern Belle. Welcome, Angel Stuff. Hey, Snuggles, I see you. Thank you so much. Welcome, Sir Senior. Thank you all so much for coming on here for this conversation. But I want us to be aware, as everyone has introduced themselves, for the most part, if you're a first timer in here, which we've already recognized a couple people, but if you're a first timer ever watching this program, because I imagine the title is going to get some people interested, maybe for the first time ever watching this channel, please recognize and appreciate that these gentlemen are not just on the panel because I have, I had to reach out to someone and grab somebody up here and I just gave them the topic of reparations. This topic is something that they're already familiar with, that they're already advocating for, that they already have knowledge of. So just kind of appreciate that when I bring on guests here, especially for this hour, for these power hours, these are just not round robin conversations. We are we need to continue to have dialogue and discussion, people of particular advocacy and credibility, so that we can have some real actions created. Of these conversations became really the Plantation for Reparations conference. And this is something that, as you all may know, I have been personally advocating for a couple of years, but particularly with a piece of tea that I am forward to closing on, but reaching out to networks and cross promoting with said networks to actually create this reality. Because the one thing that I have seen very consistent in discussion for about reparations is it may not be something that is monetarily given, because that seems to be where big discussion blows up when it comes to, well, are people going to, how can the government afford this? But what I think we should shift our conversation on is the land that was stolen. So in regards to that conversation, would love to have a deeper discussion in regards to that. um Travis, you went first with introducing yourself. So, Khalifa, I want to point this out to you first and foremost. And where you stand in regards to this conversation of reparations, and you think it is a viable option when it comes to it. And then, of course, Travis, uh, absolutely weigh in with your contribution to the conversation as well. I'm on mute.
Okay. So to be clear, you want to talk about the options that we have in terms of receiving, or what we can receive, or things that can be done for reparations, correct?
Yes, particularly land, and because that is, of course, the premise of this conversation with the plantations for reparations. I think that's a great starting point, but there might be some other possibilities when it comes to that as well. Would definitely love, because again, I know that your history and your awareness of the subject matter far extends this conversation. So would definitely love for you to add in your contributions to that particular arm of the conversation.
Okay, definitely. Which is, I did kind of slightly open up with the idea of the fact that I'm also a grower. And with that, the land is extremely important when it comes to this work. We're talking about a movement of people as well. And talking about an institution, we must also remember that I'm not sure if you all were taught this, at least we were. There were people that were here as well. Those people that were here, our people, my four ancestors, they were enslaved. Then the time happened from which some people were also taken from another continent and brought to this continent. I'm talking about America, all collective, because this is technically one whole thing. It just happens to have a little slit to kind of make a little straight to go straight up. But it was all connected before they put the Panama Canal, and that's a whole nother topic. We're talking about people who were removed from their culture, their customs, their ability to access each other through their own systems of commerce and trade and cultural exchange of language and information and knowledge. Land is extremely important. And then as well, now within the system of capitalism that we have today, it has now become a monetary status point, and as well a point of survival. We're in the benefit of a time from which we have open access to getting more land. Because a lot of people now aren't really using it how we used to. A lot of growers aren't growing on their lands anymore. A lot of growers can't grow on their land anymore. And that goes into another topic when it comes to how we operate with the government. So if the government has enough ability to tell farmers and growers that, hey, you shouldn't grow anymore. Hey, you cannot grow anymore. They should have enough gall to say, hey, let's go ahead and open up the valves and release these lands, or help these farmers and growers move their lands to those who can actually benefit from using and having their land, and particularly in having their land back, because it wasn't just the system of slavery, though I will argue that we're still in the method of the system of slavery with capitalism, because without it, we wouldn't have had a system of taking land that would go as far as up into today. So even some of my ancestors had their land taken from them, whether by force, monetarily, or force physically, with guns, threatening of their lives and the rape of their children. So they had to get up out of town. And then we had the whole northern migration movement of the early 1900s. That also has to be a part of this conversation when it comes to reparations, and especially when it comes to as old, even though it's not old for many of us, as far back as we can in terms of chattel slavery, we are still suffering from what has been done to us, especially when it comes to removal of land. And without it, as we can see here, we've literally been up under a really heavy boulder when it comes to our livelihood, our access to money, let alone access to actual good, holistic, organic food. And now look at the health conditions that we have. Look at the psychological conditions we have, because now we're also in a good, great, beautiful spiritual movement. We're now learning that we must have a connection to the land. Well, if that's the case, then wouldn't it be even more brilliant and spiritualist to also make sure the people that were initially on that land, that was maintaining that land, maintaining those forests, maintaining those rivers, that by custom and culture were doing these things, should also get access back to the very lands in which they were on? And that's where I'm at with that, is particularly when it comes to land in general, because also, in closing, I find it very interesting that we have consistent burnings of the forest over in California. The benefit of having been on my journey is that I got to see many books and paintings and images that are very much buried. You won't see these images typically. You will find a couple of them now because the internet has opened up a lot of stuff. But when it comes to looking at paintings of those who were here before us, and you get to see the curl of the hair and the darkening of the skin, and read these really old texts from folks as far back as Smith and Columbus and all the peoples the names of probably some of these university buildings and roads that we drive in these cities, you see that they were describing people that look very much like you. That does something to you. Especially being conveniently California bears my name. So it would kind of even make a little bit of sense that, you know, hey, when we talk to those who were indigenous, we find out that they actually had a manner from which they used to actually take care of the actual land. Now those people aren't there. Consistent burning, consistent loss of property value, consistent loss of property and lives. Reparations, baby. Reparations.
You want me to throw in my center too? Thanks, Khalifa. That was really interesting. So it's sort of like a complicated question to answer because there's a number of different things that come into my mind. But so when I first started talking about reparations on TikTok, you know, it was the first time I had kind of said something publicly about it, although it had been kind of, you know, churning inside me for, you know, almost 10 years at that point. And to the extent I had talked about it, you know, it'd been online and, you know, it wasn't me, my face talking about it publicly. And so when I first did, I was kind of like, well, what do you think? You know, how should reparations be done? I didn't want to be too prescriptive about it because I don't think that's my role here. I think that my role is to remind people of the debt. And, you know, so the way the conversation kind of played out was, you know, there were some folks, mostly white folks, who said, well, what about, you know, just sort of providing education, providing programs, providing government programs, that sort of thing. And the black folks in the chat said, no, cash reparations. And I think that, you know, that makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, because, you know, if you want to put people in or put money in people's pockets with as few kind of leakages along the ways you can, you give them cash. And that's like, you know, if you're doing a stimulus bill, you want to give people cash, because that's the most efficient way of doing that kind of program. So and as far as, you know, yeah, there's a lot of non-monetary loss that was suffered by enslaved folks and their descendants too. And my focus as far as TikTok has been, and, you know, my activism has been to really hammer on the monetary aspect of it, because that's, first of all, the part that's going to be the hardest to get people to agree to. And when I say people, I mean, you know, mostly white, mostly Republicans. But so I want to hammer on that because it's potentially tangible. The other reason I don't talk so much about non-monetary inheritance is because I think living in a capitalist system, we're sort of taught that it doesn't matter or that it has no value. And so, and I know it does. And I know that that's a huge part of the story. It's still a story I'm working out how to tell. And so hopefully, you know, I've got some content coming up that'll address that, because I can look back on my own family history and I can see where, you know, even though my grandparents didn't, you know, weren't wealthy, didn't leave a lot of money, they left me a lot of other things that have a lot of value to me. And so I want to figure out a way to talk about that too. Now, getting to your question about land. So I think that, first of all, there's a really nice tangible symbolism of the 40 acres and a mule, because that was approved. The United States government approved 40 acres and a mule. And then Lincoln's successor said, actually, nope, you know what? my Southern Democrat buddies don't want me to do this. So you know what? You're all just out of luck. And so I think that there's, first of all, you know, that land that didn't just vanish, it's still on the maps. And so there's a very forceful argument you can make that that land should belong to the descendants of those to whom it was originally granted. Um, there's also, I think, something very powerful about land that Khalifa was talking about, which is that land is the source of nourishment and food. Um, and it's also an ongoing source of income. There's so many things you can do with land. And I mean, you can rent it out, you can grow food on it, you can, you know, there's so much you can do with land. It's sort of like a source of recurring wealth and power that lasts generations. So that I think that's something that's really interesting to me about Plantations for Reparations is that, you know, I want to see national comprehensive reparations. But I think there's something very powerful, both symbolically and practically, about um, starting something that has real tangible benefit for the folks who live in the area around a plantation, and also uh, as sort of a signpost for the rest of the country. Hey, let's do this. You know, we're doing it. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Before you go, Courtney, yeah, because with that, that's how we'll be able to ensure that we can establish those other non-monetary things that are needed. The the practice of psychological healing, spiritual healing, that's needed for our people. Um, the ability to learn how to maintain land, the study of how to actually fiscally maintain land. Like there's levels to the receiving of land that needs to be done, and unless you actually have it, my eldest elder, my great granny, to this day professes like if you don't want it, like you best not even go ahead and get it, because if you're not going to be looking to maintaining it and keeping it and doing the work to keep it, it becomes then a burden, and that's how we end up losing even more. Hence one of the arguments, and I'll close it out. One of the arguments they were trying to have about giving us the little small checks we got during during COVID. Well, they're just going to squander it away. Even if so, what if we actually trained them, taught them, gave them access to information so they can know better about how to utilize their money to best serve them, utilize ways they can best utilize the land? That's what was also needed.
That is definitely mhm. That is definitely great, content to this to substantiate this conversation in regards to plantations reparations. First of all, these are sites that slavery is undeniable. The way that these sites even become recognized is to be registered on a historical database. So you know that slavery happened here. And we know that slavery, as alluded to, and as Khalifa can also support, slavery was not just about free labor, complete exploitation of the black body. They ever traded on was a black pregnant woman. I don't want to um, continue to exploit or promote the brutality of slavery. But we cannot fully tell the significant impact generationally, traumatically on what has happened from slavery without telling about the brutality, the reality. And these particular sites were the locations for this said brutality. And so when you talk about now what we're facing, and we're talking about African Americans, we're talking about whether you are FBA, whether you are ADOS, whether you are BIPOC, ancestry, 95% of our ancestry connects us to slavery, to chattel slavery here in the nation. And with that being said, 70% of us are renting. 70% of us are renters. We are 4 times as likely to be evicted. We are 3 times as likely to be homeless than any other demographic. And when you're talking about almost 50,000 structures that could provide housing, that could provide free housing, when you talk about 50,000 structures that 95% ancestry work to build, work to create, to maintain, only to be told 2 generations later, you don't have a place to live if you can't pay for this other place. Meanwhile, you have this whole entire mansion, this whole entire property that your ancestors literally built up with their own hands. But you're being told not even more than 2 generations later, that you, sir, ma'am, need to figure out how you're going to pay to live. The responsibility of that should not be on us. And this is where Plantations for Reparations initiative, this is where, because I said there's any place, Black people should not be trying to, if there's any place that they should not have to pay to live in, it's plantations. Because by any means, if that is an interest of theirs, for whatever reason, as you said, Khalifa, whether it is to heal, whether it is to house, whether it is to connect to their ancestry, whatever it is, if the interest is there, then absolutely it should be no obstacles with having that happen, and having that happen to create a potentially debt-free situation. Because along those statements, also, okay, when we talk about just housing, and I contend that this fight with housing, this fight for housing, I'm not talking about affordable housing, I'm just talking about housing in general. This is the civil rights movement of this generation. And as you said earlier, Khalifa, there is a shift that we are not only responsible for making sure that we're on the right side of, but that it happen progressively and productively. Because it's one thing to know that it's here, it's another thing to be in alignment with it. And we need to be. But when we talk about housing, and we talk about the challenges that are faced with homelessness, with evictions, with lack of access to it, and not to have plantations as a part of the conversation is absolutely counterproductive. These are structures that are functioning. They're a lot of them already receive government funding to maintain as well for refurbishments, remodeling, rehabbing. So that seems to be an easy connection. I definitely will continue to ask and appreciate any support and joining in with these efforts on making sure that we get some plantations under our belt. There are, as far as I know personally, there are 2 plantations that are owned by, uh, one is a Black couple, but they've converted it completely to an Airbnb, which is their right, their business. It is a business. And then there's another one that is an actual or was, which I had the experience of visiting. It was the first ever plantation I'd lived on, or I had the opportunity to live on. And it's in Boston, Virginia, Berry Hill Plantation. The difference with these plantations is no one lives on these properties. You stay your night or two and you're gone. I think without having that as an opportunity, we are missing a big component of what is needed. Because again, as you stated, Travis, it's hard for some people to appreciate the necessities or what are the benefits that is not monetary, especially we're in a capitalistic environment and society. But when you're talking about Black people that spend up to 60 to 70% of their income on where they stay, housing has got to be a part of this conversation when it comes to reparations. So, oh, I thank you for that graphic, Jose. Jose put us up a nice graphic of some houses. Thank you so much. So we're going into our closing thoughts. It is 5:50. I knew that hour would go fast. I knew it. Definitely have to have you both back on. I love this type of dialogue. I could do this all day. It may not be somebody else's version of a good time, but I tell you, it sure is mine. Um, but I would love for you both to give your closing thoughts. I'm going to allow you, of course, to go first, Travis, and you can have the last words for today, Khalifa, because I know you have a hard stop as well at 6 that you have to be getting out for. And we are definitely planning on doing this again because, again, it's important and significant that these conversations don't just stop here. They're held in uncomfortable spaces and places. And sometimes that's with the people that are closest to us. So I'm going to cam off and I'm going to mute. Go ahead, Travis. Thank you, brother. Go ahead and your last thoughts, your parting words, and then you can send us on out. Thank you for being a part of this conversation.
Well, absolutely. And thanks for having me on, and thanks, Khalifa, for having me in the group, both of you. I'm really glad to be able to talk about this because it bothers me. It bothers me that I sort of feel like our American society is upside down. The way in which enslavement was such a huge part of not just the founding of the country, but its early history, and the way that the effects of that have lingered, and the way that our culture in modern times has persuaded itself somehow that it's just that it doesn't matter, that you can just say, no, we're equal, it's cool, we're fine. Like it's insane to me to think that way. And I think that deep down on some level, a lot of people who are reflexively opposed to reparations, on some level, I think they must recognize that, and it makes them deeply uncomfortable with themselves and deeply uncomfortable with this conversation. And so, I think that there's a potential for healing, not just among descendants of enslaved Africans, but also among European Americans who came here later and know there's something wrong, but have always managed to persuade themselves that there's nothing they can do about it and it's not their problem anyway. No, if you live in the United States, it's your problem. And that's why I'm really glad that we're talking about this. And I don't just see it as like some chaotic pursuit. You know, I think there's a way to make it happen. I think that history shows that you never know what's around the corner. Things can change in radical and unpredictable ways, and that's why I'm talking about this, because I know that that can happen, and I hope that it does on the issue of reparations. And I think that Courtney, your program, Plantations for Reparations, is, you know, a really exciting, resonant way of not just talking about it, but like you say, being about it. So thanks for having me on.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. And Travis, I definitely want to connect with you as a chair of the University Studying Slavery conference. I'm sure you would love to be able to come to that. We'll be having that coming up this fall. And hold on real quick. Gotta holler for a student. Noah. Yeah. Wow. It was a privilege to not only be here, but be here with you all and have these conversations. Because at this particular point in time, as we've stated, you know, we're lucky. We're blessed to be in this time where this is a openly shared lexicon. Like it's still got a little brush of fire on it. You know, some people are still a little bit uncomfortable with it. And that's the thing. There could be no change without discomfort. People need to become uncomfortable. Get used to that discomfort. That way we can push for the change. There can be no change, no growth, no success without struggle. And with that, you know, we are the generation that's going to be doing that, struggling. All the work that we're doing together as a collective, freeing ourselves even spiritually and mentally from the bonds of the system that's culturized, having to work hard to get by, is a part of the very things that we're fighting for. And for anything, for what's occurring in this conversation we're having, whenever we as melanated, brown, Black, African, American, Afro-Indigenous people, whenever we receive, the whole world receives. And that's why this is key. When we as a people are given our restitution, our ability to restore ourselves as our natural God-given selves that we're supposed to be, especially where we're supposed to be, all things will return back to normal and return back to as it should be. So that's why I'm also in this fight and will be in this fight for the long haul. I appreciate everybody who's joining us and doing this. And Corey, you got the right one. I'm loving this, and I'm loving the work you're doing. And definitely as a grower, Plantation for Reparations is necessary. And also the growing of certain items on those lands as plantations is also necessary as well. So I'll be looking forward to our future conversations. Thank you so much for having me.